Hello guys, my name is Yolanda Christian and I'm from class 2021C. So today we are going to discuss about poetry, the writers, the basic things and a lot of more. So let's be started. So about poetry, Britannica says that poetry is a literature that evokes a concentrate imaginative awareness of experience or a specific emotional response through language, chosen and arranged for its meaning, sound and rhythm. Wikipedia also says that poetry is a form of literature that use aesthetic and rhythmic qualities of language, such as poetic sound symbolism, and then matter to evoke meanings and in addition to or in the place of the prosaic ostensible meaning. So, what about something simple that I can explain to a child about what is poetry? The best definition I can say that poetry is, I've heard that is a poetry is the extraordinary perception of the ordinary. Obviously, that it's not quite detailed enough because it misses a lot of bits and pieces of language and mechanics and syntax that separate poetry from anything else in the world, even music. One of its close genres, but if you want a simple definition of poetry, I haven't heard a better one. So this is the poetry that we're going to discuss is The More Loving One by W.H. Auden. So I'm gonna read it for you guys. Looking up at the stars, I know quite well that for all they care, I can go to hell. But on earth, indifference is the last we have to dread from man or beast. How should we like it were stars to burn, with a passion for us we cannot return? If equal affection cannot be, let the more loving one be me. Admire as a thing I am, of stars do not give a damn. I cannot, now I see them say, I miss one terribly all day. Were all stars to disappear or die, I should learn to look at an empty sky and feel its total dark sublime, though this might take me a little time. And that was the poetry, and the title is uh, The More Loving One by W.H. Auden. So the next things I'm gonna explain is about basic things about poetry. So there is a meter, stanza, rhyme, and then there's also different forms of poetry like blind verse, rhyme poetry, free verse, haiku, odes, and sonnet. So the first thing I'm gonna explain is what is matter in poetry. So a poem can contain many elements to give it structure. Rhyme is perhaps the most common in these elements. Countless poetic works from limericks to epic poems to pop lyrics contain rhymes. But equally important is matter, which impose specific length and emphasis of a given line of poetry. And then what is stanza? So stanza in poetry is used to describe the main building block of a poem. It is a unit of poetry composed of lines that relate to a similar thought or topic, like a paragraph in prose or a verse in a song. Every stanza in a poem has its own concept and serves a unique purpose. A stanza may be arranged according to rhyming patterns and meters. The syllabic beats of a line. It can also be a free-flowing verse that has no formal structure. And then, what is a rhyme scheme? Uh, there are many different types of rhymes that poets use in their work: inter rhymes, slant rhymes, and I rhymes, identical rhymes, and more. One of the most common ways to write a rhyming poem is to use a rhyme scheme composed of shared vowel sounds and consonants. So the next one is the forms. There's a lot of different forms of poetry. The first is I'm gonna explain about the blank space. So, blank space is poetry that is written with a precise meter, such as iambic pentameter and doesn't rhyme. So, Shakespeare was a big fan of this form and used it on a lot of his plays and sonnets. The next is rhyme poetry. Rhyme poetry are poems that follow a rhyme scheme. This scheme can vary from poem to poem, but one of the most common rhyme schemes to follow is rhyming couples. And the next is free verse. A free verse is a poem that doesn't have a consistent rhyme scheme, rhythm, or musical form. This type of poem may also be called prose poetry because they combine techniques from both poetry and prose. And the next is haiku. It's like the names, like the Asian name haiku is originating in Japan. The haiku is a three-line poem that has a 5 syllables in the first and last line, and the 7 syllables in the middle line. They often depict an image of nature. You can use these haiku poems lesson pack to help you to teach children about haiku poems. Why we use haiku poems to teach children? Because it contains an image to make children like interesting or want to know about the haiku poems. So the next one is ode. Uh, Odes are lyrical poems originating in ancient Greece. They are typically short and don't rhyme. They tend to focus on a specific individual or idea or an event. And the last one is a sonnet. So, a sonnet is a poem with a 40 line that is traditionally about the topic of love. Sonnets have internal rhymes and typically end with a heroic couplet, a rhyming couplet written in iambic pentameter, and then there is the background of W.H. Auden. So right now I'm gonna explain to you guys about the background of W.H. Auden, the poets that I'm gonna explain, because today I'm going to choose the poem by W.H. Auden, so I'm gonna explain a little more about W.H. Auden. So, Winston H. Auden was born in New York England on February 21 in 1907. He moved to Birmingham during childhood and he was educated at First Church, Oxford as a young man. He lived and he was influenced by the poetry of Thomas Hardy and Robert Frost, as well as William Blake, Emily Dickinson, Gerard Manley Hopkins, and Old English verse. And then at Oxford, his versatility as a poet was immediately apparent, and he formed lifelong friendship with two fellow writers, Stephen Spender and Christopher Isherwood, in 1928. Auden collection poems was privately printed, but it wasn't until 1930 when another collection titled Poems, though its contents were different, was published that Auden was established as the leading voice of a new generation. Ever since, Auden has no admired for his unsurpassed technical virtuosity and an ability to write poems in a nearly every imaginable verse form. So the incorporation in this work of popular culture, current events, and vernacular speech, and also for the vast range of his intellect, which drew easily from an extraordinary variety of literatures, art forms, social and political theories, and scientific and technical information. He had a remarkable wit and often mimicked poetic styles of other poets.
I think it's the way life changes when in love. Yeah, I surround my soul with the positivity. That's why I don't worry about the things that I don't see. Yeah. These days I don't worry about much. I think we should have some more fun. I still dream about the days when we were young. I'll take a hit and still finish in one. Yeah, yeah. Memory lane, isn't that too far away from our hoods? Yeah, yeah. The ones we keep close, we should never let go. So tell me who you love, baby. Take a moment to unwind, fix yourself and realign yourself with the world, baby. Breathe slow, baby. Yeah.
Prolific writer, Auden was also known as a playwright, librettist, editor, and essayist. So he is generally considered the greatest English poet of the 20th century. His work has exerted a major influence on succeeding generations of poets on both sides of the Atlantic. So W.H. Auden served as a chancellor of the Academy of American Poets in 1954 to 1973, and devoted most of the second half of his life between residence in New York and then in Austria. And then, unfortunately, he died in Vienna on September 29 in 1973. So, continuing the explanation, so I'm gonna explain a little more about the life of W.H. Auden. His education followed the standard pattern for children in the middle and upper classes. At 8, he was sent away to St. Edmund Preparatory School. So next I'm gonna explain about the life of W.H. Auden. So the first is his education. His education followed the standard pattern of children in the middle and upper classes. At 8, he was sent away to St. Edmund's Preparatory School in Surrey, and in 13 to a public private school in Gresham, at Hull in Norfolk. Auden intended to be a mining engineer, and he was interested in primarily in science. He specialized in biology, and then in 1922, he had discovered his vocation as a poet, and 2 years later, his first poem was published in public school first in 1925. He entered the University of Oxford, or in that year is called Christ Church, where he established a formidable reputation as poet and sage, having a strong influence on such other literary intellectuals as C.D. Lewis, then Louis MacNeice, and then Stephen Spender, and also his first collection of Auden poems in 1928. Though their names were often linked with the poets, with his as a poets of, so he also called Auden generation. The nation of an Auden group dedicated to revolutionary politics was largely a journalistic invention. Upon graduating from Oxford in 1928, Auden over a year abroad by his parents, chose Berlin rather than the Paris by which the previous literary generation had been fascinated. He fell in love with the German language and then was influenced by its poetry, cabaret song, and plays, especially those by Bertolt Brecht. He turned to become a schoolmaster in Scotland and England for the next 5 years. In his collect shorter poems, Auden divided his career into four periods. The first extends from 1927. He was still an undergraduate. Through the errors of 1920 and 1932, the great paid on both sides, which along with poems established Auden's reputation in 1930. Best reveals the imperfectly fused by fascinating amalgam of material from Icelandic sagas, Old English poetry, public school stories, Karl Marx, Sigmund Freud, and other psychologists, and moral defects of the individual who constitute it. Though the social-political implications of the poetry attract most attention, the psychological aspect is primary. The nature of poetry acts a kind of therapy, performing a function somehow analogous to the psychoanalytical remains fundamental in Auden. So, continue the next period is in 1933 to 1938 is that in which Auden was the hero of the left. Continuing the analysis of the evils of capitalist society, he also warned of the rise of totalitarianism on this island. 1937 in Britain looked stranger. In 1936, his verse became more open in stature and accessible to a larger public. For the group Theatre, a society that put on experimental of non-commercial plays in London, he wrote first The Dance of Death, a musical propaganda play, then replaced in collaboration with Christopher Isherwood out of France since preparatory school. The Dog Beneath the Skin in 1935, The Ascent of F6 in 1936, and On Frontier in 1938. Auden also wrote commentaries for documentary films, including a classic of that genre is a Nightmare in 1936, numerous essay and book reviews and reportage, most notably on a trip to Ice Island, in which McNeice described in Letters from Iceland in 1937, and A Trip to China with Isherwood that was the basis of Journey to War in 1939. Auden visits Spain briefly in 1937. His poem Spain in 1937 being the only immediate result but the visit, according to his letter collection, marked the beginning both of his disillusion with the left of his return to Christianity. In 1936, he married Erika Mann, the daughter of the German novelist Thomas Mann, in order to provide her with a British passport. When he and Isherwood went to China, they crossed the United States both ways, and on return journey they both decided to settle there. In January 1939, both did so. So, in the third period, in 1939 to 1946, Auden became an American citizen and underwent decisive change in his religious and intellectual perspective. Another Time in 1940 contained some of his best songs and topical verse, and The Doubleman contained the Nero Letter, which provided the title of British edition in 1941, embodies his positions of the faith of commitment to Christianity, the beliefs and the attitudes that are basic to all Auden's work after 1940 are defined in three long poems: Religious in the Christmas Oratorio for the Time Being in 1944, aesthetic in the same volume, Seas and the Mirror, a quasi-dramatic documentary on William Shakespeare, The Tempest, and Social Psychological in the Age of Anxiety in 1947, The Burgh, a clerk that won Auden the Pulitzer Prize in 1948. Congrats for Auden. And then Auden wrote no long poems after that. So, getting into the next period is the fourth period. The fourth period is began in 1948 when Auden established the pattern of leaving New York City each year to spend the month from April to October in Europe. From 1948 to 1957, his summer residence was the Italian island in Ischia. In the latter year, he built a farmhouse Kirchstetten in Austria, where he then spent his summers in the Shield of Achilles in 1955, Homage to Clio in 1960, the About the House and the City Without Walls in 1969 are sequences of poems arranged according to an external pattern, canonical hours type of landscape rooms of a house, with a Chester Coleman, an American poet and close friend who lived with him for more than 20 years. He rehabilitated the art of the opera libretto. Their best known collaboration are the Rakes Progress in 1951, for Igor Stravinsky, Elegy for Young Lovers in 1961, and the Besserits in 1966 for Hans Werner Henze, and Love's Labor Lost for Nicholas Nabokov. They also edited an Elizabethan songbook in 1956. In 1962, Auden published a volume of criticism, The Dead Hand, and in 1970, his commonplace book, A Certain Word. He spent much time on editing and translating, notably the collected poems on St. John Perse in 1972. Auden transferred his winter residence from New York City to Oxford, where he was an honorary fellow at Christ Church College. Of the numerous honors conferred on Auden in this last period, the Bollingen Prize in 1953, the National Book Award in 1956, and the Professorship of Poetry at Oxford in 1956 until to 1961 maybe mentioned. So the next I'm gonna explain to you guys what I'm gonna show to you is the legacy that left by W.H. Auden. In the early 1930s, Auden was acclaimed prematurely by some as the foremost poet, then writing in English was on disputable ground that his poetry was more relevant to contemporary social and political realities than of T.S. Eliot and William Butler Yeats, who previously had charted the summit. By the time Eliot's death in 1965, however, a convincing case would be made for the assertion that Auden was indeed Eliot's successor, as Eliot had inherited sole claim to a supremacy when Yeats died in 1939. Auden was a poet, far more copious and varied than Eliot and far more uneven. He tried to interpret the times, diagnose the ills of society, and deal with intellectual and moral problems of public concern. But the need to express the inner world of fantasy and dream was equally apparent, and hence and the poetry is sometimes bewildering. So if the poems taken individually are often obscure, especially the earlier ones, they create when taken together a meaningful and mythical characters and situation. In his later years, Auden ordered the word of his poetry and made it easier of access. He collected his poems, revised them, and presented them chronically in two volumes: Collector Poems in 1927 to 1957, and Collect Longer Poems in 1969. So I'm gonna tell you guys about the famous works of W. Auden. So there's a 10 list of poems that I can say great, but you can read it and also you can tell me how good is it for you guys. So the first one is Lullaby, and then Autumn Song, and then there's a Nightmare, and then Muse the Book's Art, and then In Memory of W.B. Yeats, and then there's the Shield of Achilles, and also September 1, 1939, and also On the Circuit, and The Unknown Citizens, and the last one poem is If I Could Tell You. So we're gonna enter the last material is the more loving one conclusion. Conclusion about the poem that I'm going to explain, the more loving one. So the poem, the more loving one, was run by Winston H. Auden, better known as W. Auden, in 1957. This is a poem about unrequited love. Auden, a British author playwright, a poet is most known today for his poems. Much of his early poetry reflects the political conflicts he encountered in the various areas of the world where he had traveled. Later, his poetry would reflect more religious and spiritual elements. Auden eventually moved to the United States and became a citizen. In 1948, he won the Pulitzer Prize for his long poem, The Age of Anxiety. Auden returned to Europe as his health started to deteriorate, and on September 29, in 1973, he died at his home in Vienna, Austria, at the age of 66. And then, The More Loving One is a poem with an extended metaphor is used to depict the feeling of the speaker, who is the victim of unrequited love. Auden is used to extend the metaphor of stars to represent the lovers who do not feel the same of their pursuer. The speaker recognized that the stars do not give a damn, but that does not to seem him, does not to stop him from admiring them. Additionally, in the first stanza, Auden established his extended metaphor of stars as the lovers in the first two lines. He writes, "Looking up at the stars, I know quite well that for all they care, I can go to hell." So the speaker is informing his readers from the very beginning that he knows just by looking at his lovers that the emotion he feels for him, he or her are not returned. Additionally, that he, the unrequited lover, is so indifferent that he or she does not care about the fate of the speaker. Auden finished the stanza in lines 3 and 4, but on earth indifference is the least we have to dread from man or beast. So here, Auden is perhaps insinuating that he would rather his lover feel indifference toward him or opposed to a contrary, which could be hatred or love that goes unrequited by him. So, Auden continues in this theme to the second stanza, which opened with a question to the reader. He writes, How should we like it? It will start to burn with a passion for us we could not return. He seems to be asking the reader which would be better, to be loved or not loved in return. To be the one who is the on the other end, or who does the reciprocate the love one sweeter. The speaker answered the question for his reader in lines 7 and 8. If equal affection cannot be, let the more loving one be me. According to the speaker and Auden, it is better to be the one who loves as opposed to the one who doesn't count. In the third stanza, the tone shifts slightly, and the speaker recognizes that love is fleeting and impermanent, where all four lines of the stanza complete one thought. Here, the speaker acknowledges that what he currently feels uh, for his lover is not something that will always be. He does not feel so strongly that he will unable to live without them. And then he even admits that when he sees them, he does not feel as though as he missed them while they have been away. So the last one I mentioned is Auden continue with his idea in the fourth and the final stanza. The speaker admits that his lover again represents as stars when they go away or die. He would learn to not only get over the person but also feel their absence of a sublime. He recognized that, however, that this would not happen overnight. Instead, it would take some time to get over the retriever of his love. And that's all the explanation from me. And if you have any question, you can write in the comment below. Uh, I hope you guys understand about the explanations of a poem, The More Loving One by W.H. Auden. Thank you for watching the video, and thank you for the time of you guys. That's all from me. Thank you very much. Thank a lot. Goodbye.